Welcome to Best Practices in Correctional Programming, Common Threads from Prison to Communities. I'm joined here today by Terry Liggins, who's the founder of TLC Services and the Hurdle Life Coach Foundation. Together, we're going to talk about what it means to engage your clients in correctional programming that really works. A couple of quick housekeeping items. First of all, there is often a question about whether CEUs are offered for these 1-hour webinars. They are not, nor will certificates be offered, but we will be sending out a recording of this webinar on Monday of next week, so watch for that. Feel free to share it out with your colleagues who couldn't join us, and hopefully that can be a helpful resource. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. Terry, I'm going to hand the mic to you to kick us off.
Excellent. Thank you, Valerie, for having me. This is a real special connection and pairing that we have, and we're going to start by sharing that story. Valerie and I smile from ear to ear because it's like we just met pretty recently, but the depth of our appreciation and admiration and respect for, one, the change companies, everything they do and stand for, and then my own personal story, and we just mutually are in love with that synergy. And let me tell you exactly what that means. So at Hurdle Life Coach Foundation, I'm the founder and the executive director. We've been providing direct support to formerly incarcerated adults, youth impacted by the justice system, families in need, providing them, life skills training, job skills training, character coaching, helping what are called ACEs impacted, adverse childhood experiences, and justice impacted people navigate life. Our mission statement is to provide and to help to create more safe spaces for ACEs impacted and justice impacted people. The reason I started the nonprofit organization is because it was birthed of my own lived experiences. What I didn't know 10 years ago when I first learned about ACEs is that my childhood was saturated with these adverse childhood events. And because of that and what we know, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, those ACEs really shape mindset and behavior and ultimately leads to a lot of different adult outcomes. And one of those things is incarceration. You can't tell by looking at me, but 10 years ago today, I was an incarcerated adult in a federal institution here in South Dakota. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to participate in the cognitive behavioral therapy program with the incentive of reducing my sentence. I was sentenced to 3 years and 3 months total, but because I accepted responsibility and said I would do this program, they reduced my amount of time. I ended up being in that institution for about 14 months. And for 13 and a half of the 14 months, I was in this environment where I was introduced to the interactive journals of the change program. As I was going through this cognitive reprogramming after a whole childhood experience of adversity, interesting enough, I went on to college and got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree and excelled in athletics and leadership. But through all of that lived experiences, I still had some things that had never been assessed or addressed in my mind. And it wasn't until I was in federal prison in the RDAP program, hovering over interactive journals, that I was beginning to rethink everything about how I thought and my life was changing. It was so moving for me that I wondered who created this magic. I remember looking for, where's the copyright? Who incorporated it? Who's the architect of these journals that are changing me? And it said the change companies. You fast forward and I get out of prison in 2016. I face every reentry barrier that formerly incarcerated people face: lack of trust from family, rejection from employment, transportation barriers, self-esteem and confidence. It was all in the sewer. But I persist. Entered my reentry, took those jobs, volunteered, and worked my way into community service and nonprofit work, and ultimately started my own nonprofit in 2020. As I was looking for ways to build more credibility with evidence-based programs, the internet algorithm said, "Do you want to know about the change companies?" I said, "Yes, absolutely. I want to know about the change companies. Maybe there could be a way that we can build a partnership to integrate the journals that helped change me personally into the programming that we're now providing." Long story short, I meet somebody from the change companies. I start exuding gratitude all over them. They said, "Will you tell a marketing person?" I said, "Yes." They put it in print. It went to print and it just exploded all of a sudden onto the radar of Valerie, the change companies, and they're saying, hey, Terry, we want to work more closely with you. We admire and respect your story. We can tell that you're genuine and sincere with the impact. And every time they say, Terry, will you come and help share your impact and story and lived experience, I always say yes. And so here we are doing it for the second time together because we were just in Florida at an in-person conference where we did this. And so just excited to now provide this virtually. That's how Valerie and I came together.
Yes, and just to add on to that, I think it's easy to see how authentic and genuine a person Terry here is. And alongside that, gratitude is a really powerful character strength that he possesses. So all of these things combined to really impress me personally, our team overall at the Change Companies, and we're just so excited to work alongside each other to share this important work.
Super excited.
Okay, so jumping right in, today's topic is 5 elements of effective programming. We're going to quickly go through what each of these 5 are, and then we'll do a deeper dive. One thing, you may have all heard this quote, but I always like to open this presentation by sharing a powerful quote that I love from Brene Brown, where she said, "Stories are data with a soul. Stories are data with a soul." Sometimes when we think about evidence-based practices, we think about them in terms of program names on a clearinghouse list, large data sets, longitudinal studies, things like this. And those are all important. They're relevant. We need to make sure that the work that we're doing is data driven. But I think what we tend to forget sometimes is that when we talk about evidence-based practices, they are only evidence-based if there are real human stories of change attached to them. If someone is able to, experience an intervention and say, this really made a difference for me. And so today we're going to get the privilege of hearing one of those stories through Terry. We will be highlighting some real research and giving you some real practices that you can start integrating in your agency, but we'll be connecting those insights to Terry's real human story. And just a quick note, I guess, is that while Terry's experience occurred during incarceration, everything we're covering today is equally applicable in community corrections settings, which is why we're sharing them here. Um, we'll be covering a lot of ground. This could all be a 2-day training. We're going to just scratch the surface, but hopefully you can walk away with something some sort of nugget that's relevant to you, your agency, and the people that you serve. So really quickly, the first thing we'll be covering is leveraging the power of peers, thinking through how are you utilizing people with lived experience to increase outcomes for the people you're serving.
The second one we're going to cover is equipping yourself with evidence-based tools. One thing I can guarantee through the personal story is that you'll be inspired, you'll be motivated, you'll have a sense of hope that increases in the impact work that you're doing. But we also know that you need evidence-based solutions and tools for the grants. And some people are just wired that way as well. And so we're going to make sure we really balance this out with inspiration and hope and motivation, and also really dial in on evidence-based tools and practices.
The third one is to use rituals to reinforce key milestones. So what are we memorializing within our agency? What are some of the recurring activities we do that celebrate progress along the way?
Yeah, I love rituals and milestones. There's so many of them that I keep with me. I'm going to show you some of them later. They're super motivating and they remind you of where you've been and everything that you're able to still ultimately become. The fourth thing we're going to do is talk about those cognitive behavioral approaches. That is a best practice. It is under leveraged. It needs to be amplified more. And we're going to definitely dive into why exactly that's imperative for this type of work, working with the justice impacted people and helping to address that cognitive behavioral opportunities for development and change.
And then the fifth thing is going to be about individualizing your treatment and programming approaches using the evidence-based practice of interactive journaling. I just want to say to Brandy, who noted that she did the program, that's why she's here today. Congratulations, Brandy. Thank you for sharing that. And interactive journaling is an important part of what we do here at the Change Companies. So we'll be covering that a bit more. Okay, so let's jump into element number 1, leveraging the power of peers. Now, when we talk about peers, there are sort of 2 different categories that we're referencing. One is making sure that we're bringing our clients together in spaces where they can learn from each other as part of mutual support groups. Research shows that this is a really powerful approach. The other is, how do you leverage people who not only have that lived experience, but have the specialized training to really support the clients that you're serving? So things like peer support specialists. So Terry, I'm going to hand it to you to talk a little bit more about what that has looked like for you in your own experience.
It's been everything. And I didn't really realize how important it was until I was really in that therapeutic community environment. That's a key term there, therapeutic community. A therapeutic community is an approach to behavior change where the community is the modality for change. Also, Frederick Hill, welcome home, brother. And I'm so happy that you're here too. This is going to be so good. It's a therapeutic community is when you use the community as the modality for change. And when I was in the RDAP program at that federal prison, the reason it was so impactful is because what they taught us to do is to address one another from a shared lived experience perspective. What I'm finding in my work, what I found in my own personal journey is there is authority, but then there's also authenticity. And as much as we would love that because you have the authority that moves people towards change, a lot of people sprint the other direction. If you try to force and do brute and use your title and your authority to try to implement or institute some type of change, many justice impacted people are just sprinting the other direction. They're anti-authority. Peer-to-peer support leverages authenticity. There's a lived experience that we share together. And now I'm able to drop into my body, drop into my experience, look you in the eye and say, I've been there too. When you're able to do that, you move into trust and safety much quicker, much more seamlessly, and more in a way that authority just doesn't. I'm not saying that authority isn't important. I'm not saying that you haven't earned your authority. I'm saying that working with the justice involved and justice impacted, authenticity and peer-to-peer support is more effective to get you to trust and safety quicker. You know, when you're using peers, there's another term, it's called credible messengers. If you haven't heard of credible messengers, you ought to do the research into that. There's a whole movement on credible messengers. There's a website called crediblemessengers3.org. Jump in there, look at what they're doing with credible messengers. The Coalition for Juvenile Justice is talking about it. The Center for Public Justice is talking about it. Even the Office of Justice Programs, they're talking about credible messengers. What are credible messengers? People with lived experiences sharing that with other people with lived experiences. Let me tell you something. We're all credible messengers. Doesn't it hit different or land differently when a man talks to you about being a man? Or if a mom talks to you about being a mom? You receive it. You know they know where you're coming from. We have that same opportunity to do that with the justice involved and justice impacted. If we move away from disqualifying the formerly incarcerated based on their criminal history to including them in behavior change because they can relate as peers, we're going to see a completely different change and shift in how fast we move people into positive behavior. And so in that RDAP program, it was a 500-hour program. I ended up getting an extra dose of love and care and actually went through 800 hours of this program. But they taught us how to confront behavior that was inappropriate or irrational. There was a process called confronting and leveling and a pull-up. And they just taught us how to say, here's the issue I see you're having, to how to deliver it in a respectful way. And when you teach peers how to confront and level, when you teach peers, you know, how to really leverage their lived experience, it moves behavior change more quickly than authority ever could. So it's highly recommended to leverage peers in this type of work.
Now, Terry, I just want to call out the image on this slide. Could you share a little bit more with us about what we're looking at here and how your work as a peer has really translated to work in the community?
Yeah, if you notice the really debonair gentleman in that fedora hat, that's me. and and I'm actually running a brand new men's support program that we launched here in Sioux Falls. And it was so moving and it was so impactful and it was so powerful. It was called Impossible. And what we did with the Impossible program is what people thought was impossible, which is bring men together. to be vulnerable, to be transparent, to be honest and accountable with each other about the social conditioning of what it means to carry the weight of the world of being a man on your shoulders and often feeling like you're not meeting that mark. Because it was a peer-to-peer group, look at the turnout. Because it was a peer-to-peer group, we had men talking about things that they didn't talk about anywhere else. There was tears and they were never shamed. There was talks about emotional intelligence and misery and mourning and mindset and motivation and masculinity, because everything started with the letter M in that impossible program. But that is the largest one that we had in our 6-month program. That was the mentorship and mastermind session. And it's just a really great embodiment of what happens when peers lead groups and the type of turnout you can get in trust and safety. And we're so proud of what we're doing with our men support group, the Impossible.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So this has already been touched on by Terry a bit, but what are some of the research-based benefits of leveraging the power of peers? Well, there are a bunch actually. One is the research really shows that when you leverage peers, when you bring those credible messengers, those people with lived experience into your programming, it's going to improve program participation. That includes, being able to show up at the day reporting center on a consistent basis, or the probation or parole office, attending your counseling sessions. There's also research that shows that adherence to medication for opioid use disorder programs improve when a peer is part of that work. What we see improved self-esteem and motivation to change among program participants when peers are involved, improvement in, the development of recovery capital, things that help people maintain recovery from substance uses, better compliance with court conditions, and a reduction in recidivism. So this is a really powerful tool to think about leveraging. What's the right timing? The answer is early and often. Peers can be part of your early programming or pre-programming to sit down with people and talk about some of the benefits, to create buy-in and motivation to get involved in your program. And then they can continue to support and mentor the person as they engage in things like hearings, counseling sessions, reintegration into the community. Peer recovery specialists can be really important when someone's at risk, to flag those risks and bring them to the appropriate staff members. So there's a number of ways throughout someone's program duration that you can really leverage peers and make them an integral part of your programming. If you don't yet involve peer support specialists or credible messengers in your program, there are a number of organizations that you can lean on that are highly credible, that can help you identify trained specialists who have undergone the appropriate certification and training to qualify them for working in your agency.
Yeah, I'll tell you too, you want to get those credible messengers into that peer specialist training because it adds a level of legitimacy and more knowledge into exactly what it is that we were experiencing. Because a lot of us didn't know what trauma was or what a substance use disorder might be and some of those things. And so when you take that person with lived experience and pair them with institutions that help with train those peer specialists, you equip them with more information, be that much more effective. And also, it provides a great pro-social support. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but if you give somebody the opportunity to pay it forward, keep busy doing positive, that keeps them out of trouble too. And so it's a great pairing to take lived experience and find them ways to have them become trained peer specialists as well.
That's right. Okay, number two is to equip yourself with evidence-based tools. And really what we mean by this, the list you see here is maybe a little overwhelming. Again, these could all be 2-day trainings. Today is not about educating you on each of these tools, but just to flag that it's valuable to learn about what is evidence-based, what is working, to stay on top of that research, to make sure your staff are trained on evidence-based practices that are relevant to your agency and your work, and then to have some sort of quality assurance process in place to ensure that fidelity is being maintained to those evidence-based tools. The more tools that you have in your toolkit, as everyone here I'm sure knows, the better equipped you'll be to really individualize your programming to the needs of each individual that you're serving. Terry, should I jump to the next slide, or do you have more to say here?
No, ready to go.
Okay. I'm going to hand it to Terry because one of these important pillars is trauma-informed care. I saw there have been a few comments about ACEs here today. So Terry, go ahead.
So one of the evidence-based approaches is trauma-informed care. I'm going to tell you from having lived experience with the justice system as a youth and as an adult. So I was also on juvenile detention and probation before I had my adult incarceration experience. And in my opinion, as a practitioner in this work, the greatest gap and the greatest need in our justice administration is trauma-informed care, bar none. The greatest gap and the greatest need and the greatest opportunity is trauma-informed care. And so in our work at Hurdle Life, it's not just about reform, it's about trauma-informed reform. The number one belief at Hurdle Life Coach Foundation is that a trauma-informed community is in the best interest of everyone. And I would imagine even talking to the over 450 people that are registered for this webinar right now, that I am not shocking anyone to say trauma is very present and pervasive in the lives of justice impacted people. And if we know that is true, then how much more important it is for us to really be truly trauma informed and understanding exactly what that means, not on a surface level. I'm going to challenge you to master it, to understand all 6 elements of a trauma-informed approach, which you see right here in front of you, in front of the screen here. SAMHSA already came up with the 6 elements. They're there, but this is worth diving into. This is worth bringing in more education. This is worth more discussion about what are the 6 elements, why is safety so important, which is the foundation of all trauma-informed care. Without safety, there is nothing to build upon. You can be talking about all different type of other components and things you want to do with the justice impacted, but if you're not talking safety, you're missing the foundation. And safety in all of its forms, which is not just physical safety, emotional, psychological, spiritual, it goes on and on and on. Peer support, number 3, you see it right there. We already talked about it. We led with it because it's trauma informed. It's a part of this whole layout of the 6 elements. And so our encouragement is that you really dive into this thing. What I'm going to do today is talk to you a little bit about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, because ACEs is that seminal study that was done in the early 90s by Kaiser Permanente, over 17,000 participants over in California. And ironically, the population was all insured, middle class, well educated, predominantly Caucasian. And what they found in that population was that 2/3 of the population had at least 1 ACE. Actually, and then 1 in 8 of them had 4 or more ACEs. What we know about ACEs is that they co-occur. I'm speaking from a place of being trained as a master trainer in ACEs on this, actually. So once I learned that I had ACEs back in 2018 at 31 years old, I had the opportunity to be trained by the co-principal investigator of this study. And so for me, this is deep saturation. So I don't expect you to know all of these things, but I'm telling you now, they're common. ACEs are common. 2/3 of that population had 1. 1 in 8 had 4 or more. 87% of the time where there's 1, there's a co-occurrence of another. ACEs is the scientific way of just saying trauma. The justice involved and the justice impacted are deeply saturated in ACEs. This entire virtual classroom needs to dive and master the understanding of ACEs, and then the science of building resilience, which is the complement to this. ACEs is not about drawing up sympathy. It's a history tool. It helps us to understand what has happened to people, not what's wrong with them. We never, ever think what's wrong. We always wonder what happened. So the ACEs assessment helps us get that understanding. We learn about household dysfunction, witnessing domestic violence, involvement with the justice system, mental health. It goes on and on and on. We don't have enough time to do the full training. Please understand ACEs, dive into your 6 elements of trauma-informed care, bring in a trauma-informed practitioner, and master what it means to be trauma-informed. It is the number 1 gap in need in our justice administration.
Thanks so much, Terry. Before we jump into the next element of evidence-based tools that we want to highlight, just want to have a quick conversation with you because I want to cover something that you've said you're working on. Can you share that with me, actually? What's a habit you're working on developing right now?
Yeah, so I'm actually, I've been in recovery. I've been trying to work on some things, and one of the things I really want to try to do, Valerie, is become more punctual, more
Mm.
reliable. I'm trying to be on time to the places I'm scheduled to be.
Wow, that's a tough one. But it happens to be something that I'm really experienced with. I've done a lot of Googling on good time management, and something that I've learned is that if you just set a timer for like 10 minutes before you have an appointment or engagement, it becomes really easy to do this. So I don't think you should have any problem making this change because I can give you all the skills you need to be effective.
Well,
Sound
I'm
good?
not really. I'm not really that motivated
Okay.
by that.
Okay,
But
time out. I just want to express how uncomfortable I feel. I have just felt share saying things in that way. Hopefully, you all felt the same discomfort. Just wanted to show a good example of what not to do
yeah,
um, when it comes to a specific practice. Terry, maybe you can model a better way.
yeah, you share with me something you're trying to work on, Valerie, and I'll show you how it's done. I'll show them how it's done.
Okay, I have been slacking on the habit of attending the gym on a regular basis. I can feel my fitness declining, and I've kind of been thinking I need to get back into that habit.
So you want to get into the habit of going to the gym. How long have you been thinking about that?
Oh, a couple months now, falling
Okay,
off
so
the wagon.
you've been thinking about it for a couple of months. Is there anybody that you think of that that are motivating you to move towards that change, or what type of thing is causing you to want to engage in this?
I'm just feeling less energy. I can feel, my pants are starting to get tight. I'm seeing some consequences of this routine falling off.
Okay, so it's uncomfortable with your wardrobe. Any other things that would maybe motivating you to want to be in the gym?
Just knowing that I'll feel so much better if I can start my day in that way.
So I'm hearing you say that, you'll be more comfortable in your clothing and in your skin. You feel like your mood is going to be better if you get into the gym. You've been thinking about it for a few months now, and it's something that you really want to do.
That's right. Okay, so you all may have picked up on what I was doing really poorly, what Terry was doing really well. Again, this is not a motivational interviewing training, but this is just an opportunity to plant the reminder of the importance and value of motivational interviewing in the daily interactions that we have with our clients, right? So, again, don't have time to go into the skill, but remember to pose those open-ended questions like what you just heard Terry posing to me. He was really affirming. He reflected back some of what I was sharing with him. And was able to summarize in a very brief interaction, but would have been able to even gather a greater bouquet of summaries if we'd been able to spend more time on this. So, when we're talking about evidence-based tools, Terry and I both felt it would be remiss to not plant a reminder of the value and impact of having conversations in this way.
And especially when working with the justice involved, they're very fragile. We're all fragile, but they're very fragile, very sensitive. And so finding this more indirect, science-based approach to pull out their motivation, not your motivation. Don't try to fear them into change. This negative consequence is going to happen, or, just trying to paint this gloom and doom. If you use open-ended questions, if you have the right posture, if you find their internal motivation, that's what's going to sustain them beyond external potential consequences. Another thing that just kind of came to my mind too, really quick, and when it comes to trauma-informed care, I really want to encourage people to make sure you're doing your groups in a circle. That is one of the simplest things you can do that is trauma informed, and that helps ACEs impacted people have a sense of safety because no one's at their back. They can always see the exit, and authority is neutralized. And so I really wanted to mention that one practical thing that you can do from a trauma informed way.
That's a great transition, Terry, into the next evidence-based practice here is using rituals. So, I mean, we can think about the things that we do on a regular basis, like setting our chairs in a circle, uh,
Mm-hmm.
to reinforce what's working with our participants. When we talk about rituals, we're talking about what are some of the things we do repeatedly to reward good behavior, to create a sense of community, to reinforce progress and celebrate successes on our participants' individual change journeys.
When I think of rituals and reinforcement, I always think of this Tony Robbins quote that says, repetition is the mother of skill. Anything that you want to become exceptional at or master, you put it on repeat. It doesn't matter if that's shooting free throws, it doesn't matter if it's writing poetry, you just put it on repeat, and that's how you increase the skill level. And so when you're doing rituals and milestones and things on a daily basis, this is one thing you can do to help that cognitive behavioral change that we're moving towards when working with the justice involved. When I was away in prison in the RDAP program, one of the things that we did every day was a pledge. Just like you kind of, the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Most of us, back in our generation, we remember the Pledge of Allegiance, and we all could probably say it right now because of how often we had to do it every single day. Well, in that RDAP program, in that therapeutic community, we had to do a pledge. And I've been out of prison now over 9 years, yet right now I can look right into the camera and clearly recite, we walk the path of courage, strength, and unity to reach our ultimate goals. While we study our past to understand our faults, we make an honest choice to change, to be accountable for our actions and committed to living a responsible lifestyle. Word for word, without a stutter, hardwired into my mind, and then now subconsciously driving my behavior, walking that path of courage, strength, and unity, doing it scared to reach my ultimate goals. While I study my past, constantly reflecting to understand my faults, not looking to blame, I make an honest choice for change, which is the foundation of all change, to be accountable for my actions and committed to living a responsible lifestyle. Can I show you something else pretty cool? I've got this commemorative graduation coaster that says it, committed to living a responsible lifestyle. I have it with me, still here today. I hold on to it. I'm reminded of where I've been. I'm reminded of what I've gone through. I'm reminded of who I've become by being able to hold on to this commemorative coin. Maybe you recognize these types of coins. These are the ones that I got from my AA circles. Not that I go AA all the time, because I actually use peer support as my primary modality for recovery support. But I do attend AA meetings at least once or twice a year to go get my coin. And this one is my 5-year coin. And I'm actually at 7 years now. So I have all of these commemorative coins. Thank you, Valerie. I have all of these commemorative coins that I hold on to, and they remind me of where I've been. They remind me of what I've gone through. They remind me of who I become. And in the treatment courts, we also have that same opportunity to create pledges, to create mantras, to use team names. One of the things that is so important with this is language. This helps the justice involved person combat that stigmatizing language they're telling themselves, and that society is also labeling them to as well. So often we're just called inmate, offender, addict, felon. It's so nice when we can come into an environment, come into a group, and now I'm a part of Team Unstoppable. I'm a part of Team Resilience. I'm a part of Team Go-Getters. So using that positive language in a positive way helps to build that self-efficacy, helps to build that new identity. And it can't be understated how impactful it is and how it stays with you all these years later as I hold on to my commemorative coaster, all of my coins from AA. And there's another piece of keepsake I'm going to show you later from the change programs that I also keep. I have all of my interactive journals all these years later.
Great. So I just want to highlight a few key elements that Terry's already shared. We know that when you bring in rituals to reinforce these key milestones, it's going to increase retention in your program. It brings that sense of positive reinforcement and just overall positivity to the work that you're doing. And as I guess counterintuitive as it seems, it really helps build intrinsic motivation when you're giving these extrinsic rewards, celebrations, ways to commemorate progress. It actually increases people's sense of intrinsic motivation to stick with it and stay in your program. Terry's already provided a bunch of really good examples here. All I'll add is that any situation in which your participants are coming together regularly is an opportunity for a positive ritual. This can be, court appearances, group time, um, and many, many others. Phase transitions as people are graduating from one phase to another, if that's something that is part of your program, graduations, etc. You can come up with your own and take the time to ask your participants what they would like to see. What are some traditions and rituals that will help them and motivate them?
Yeah, so good. The one more I didn't mention that we had this thing called light bulb moments. That was a great thing that we're able to institute. So whenever you had an epiphany, you could just have a sheet and you wrote it down. Here's my light bulb moment. And all of a sudden you're bringing back people together. Maybe you're meeting on a week to week basis and one of your participants has had 3 light bulb moments since the last time they met. And you start the group by, hey, what are the light bulb moments that you had? And you let them share those things. And then the last thing is there was something called the blue lanyard where you kind of got to graduate with honors, right? Remember that, y'all. Remember how good it feels to be celebrated for a job well done. Remember how good it feels to get a certificate, to get a little thing around your neck like this. Oh, that feels good. This is another one that I got recently. And you know what it tells me right here, Valerie and all? May you be proud of the work you do and the person you are and the difference you make.
That's lovely.
I put that on and I just feel great. Okay, let's not understate what these mementos and keepsakes can do for people trying to rebuild esteem and confidence in their lives.
Absolutely. Okay, going into element number 4. This one is about using cognitive behavioral approaches. I don't imagine that the concept of CBT or cognitive behavioral approach is new information for anyone in this group, but when we talk about CBT, we're talking about a therapeutic approach that helps people identify, restructure, and challenge unhelpful thinking patterns, develop problem solving skills and coping skills that can help them in high risk situations, and really learn through skill building. This is about helping people think about their thinking to get more of the outcomes that they want.
And what a light bulb moment that was for me when I was sitting there in federal prison. Ironically enough, I mentioned I actually ended up in federal prison. I said yes to something I should have said no to. I did not have the level of integrity and character I have today. I was still subjecting myself to social acceptance and people pleasing. And because of that, I said yes to something I should have said no to. It led me to federal prison. This was after I got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and leadership studies, a master's in nonprofit administration. I find myself as a 30-year-old in federal prison wondering how I got here. And all of a sudden, I was introduced to my own thinking. I had never thought about my thinking. All I did was behave based on my beliefs. But never had I been in an environment where they reverse engineered my behavior back into my thoughts. What am I thinking? Back into the emotion that sparked the thought that was driven by the perception. Even deeper down yet to say, okay, what is the belief that is driving that perception? And now that we've identified this belief, that rules do not apply to me. That was one of the core beliefs I had in my life for 30 years. It comes from the criminal thinking era, entitlement. Rules do not apply to me. And so because of that, I was willing to be late to classes or late to work. Because of that, I was willing to cut across, take shortcuts in life, looking for the shortcut instead of the right way and the long way around. If it said right, I was willing to go left. If it said up, I was willing to go down. Why? Because I struggled with entitlement and I believed that rules did not apply to me. I had never heard that word a day in my life. All of that education and life experience I had, but not at home and not in college or school was I ever sat down to say, do you know what entitlement is? And let me explain that to you. Do you know what super optimism is, which is an overconfidence, and it's a belief that I can get away with it. Every single person who's incarcerated struggles with entitlement and super optimism. They believe they can get away with it, and they also believe that rules don't apply to them. Cognitive behavioral therapy allows for a safe, soft, silent place to reflect on your thinking. Reverse engineer it, get all the way down to those irrational beliefs, and then rationally challenge the belief, and then be able to forecast what positive consequences will come from this shift in my changing my belief. This happened for me in the therapeutic community while I was away in prison. Without that, I am not who I am today. Without the interactive journals introducing me to the 8 positive attitudes for change, responsibility, caring, open-mindedness, objectivity, willingness, humility, honesty, and gratitude, I'm not who I am today. My life is perennial on gratitude, humility, and honesty. And I mastered those understandings through the interactive journals of the Change Company, which implements cognitive behavioral therapy approaches. And I am not who I am today without CBT and the interactive journals. I can't understate it enough.
Thanks, Terry. So just really highlighting the benefits when we talk about CBT, as Terry's saying, it really can't be understated. It is one of the most effective interventions for justice-involved individuals. It can reduce recidivism by as much as 20 to 30% is what the research shows. It increases problem solving and emotional regulation skills. It's proven to be more effective than talk therapy alone. There's a list here of everything that CBT provides, but I want to just quickly highlight one of the questions that came up during registration was, what's the right dosage? What's the right amount of time to spend on a CBT program? There is research on this. I'm not going to share it because I know that everyone here is constrained by staff shortages, length of stays. There's any number of guardrails around you that aren't always giving you the optimum, like Terry had to do 500 to 900 hours of programming for each participant that you serve. Recognizing that there are ways that you can increase the dosage without needing to increase the time. One of those, as Terry mentioned, is interactive journaling. You can see here on this slide, there are some images of ways cognitive behavioral approaches are represented visually in the interactive journals in a way that is very evidence-based and sort of streamlines the delivery of this evidence-based practice to the folks that you're working with. Another is to think about the other programs that you're offering and see how you can infuse cognitive behavioral approaches into everything else, into the language and culture of your agency. For example, financial literacy skills. Let's talk about some of the beliefs that we have about managing money. How can we challenge those, alongside, some of the concrete skills we're learning about opening a bank account and using credit wisely? How can we also, alongside that, talk about challenging irrational beliefs about money? Talking about employment, maybe you have a job readiness program. How can we talk about some of the unhelpful beliefs you've had about employment or the self-talk you have had when a boss gives you critical feedback and you immediately become defensive? So helping people think about their thinking across these different contexts and programs is a great opportunity to do more with CBT skill building, even with the limited time that you have with your participants.
Yeah, I'll sandwich this piece here just with the importance of emotional intelligence that also comes forward when teaching CBT. I talked about learning about thoughts and perceptions, but man, when I got introduced to empathy through the attitude of caring, it completely transformed every relationship in my life because now all my relationships are empathy first. If it's not something you've practiced or it's something that you're aware of, then if it's not something you're aware of, then it's not something you can even attempt to practice. And I'll sit here and tell you that I did not know what empathy was for 30 years of my life. In the interactive journaling program, I got introduced to empathy and it completely changed everything, especially for me as a father. It's so important for me as an advocate and an educator to really make clear that the justice involved person is more than just an incarcerated person. They're a human being, their fathers, their mothers, their uncles, their sons, their future neighbors and employees. And we know that long-term success is more greatly accomplished with EQ than IQ. We have to teach emotional intelligence. And the really thing that was so profound that I learned kind of in my prison research while I was there, because I'm always been a learner. And while I was in this environment, I started asking questions to the people around me. And you know what I realized is that every person in there, when they made the choice to commit the action that ended up being a crime that sent them to prison, if they were not under the influence of an actual substance, alcohol or another drug, they were intoxicated by their emotions. That's what they were under the influence of. It was their emotions. They were either angry, they were sad, they were desperate, they were terrified, They were worried. And there's not enough environments, team, where we are teaching emotional intelligence. And because prison environments, by and large, aren't like the ones I was so privileged and fortunate to participate in, most people are leaving prison bitter, not better. So where does that opportunity come to actually supplement what they didn't learn while they were in prison? It's going to be in the community-based responses. It's going to be in those reentry centers that they're participating in. It's going to be in probation and parole. And I'll tell you, at Hurdle Life, that's where we live and breathe. I know that there's a need for trauma-informed reform within courts, cops, and corrections, but it's tough to get in there sometimes. But we as a community, that's the fourth C to the administration of justice, and we get to respond there as well with these evidence-based approaches, trauma-informed care, peer support, and teaching emotional intelligence for the formerly incarcerated as well. I can't understate that. So important to recognize that CBT also helps us to build the EQ of our justice involved participants and clients.
That's right. So the fifth element that we're covering today is interactive journaling, and we've touched on this throughout today's presentation. But this is a really effective way to individualize your programming to the risks, needs, goals, motivations, case plans of the people that you're serving. Interactive journaling incorporates CBT and motivational interviewing, which we've touched on today. It's got enough topics that all of the risk need domains are covered in our interactive journaling library. And it's really supportive of the peer facilitation approach that we've also talked about. This is something peers can be trained on and utilize in their interactions to give structure to the sessions that they're having with your participants. There's a lot of research that shows ways in which this increases pro-social behavior, it increases recovery capital, it increases emotional intelligence, which Terry just touched on. And I'm going to pause there, Terry, because you have a really powerful story around interactive journaling.
Well, I told you that I show you that I still keep all of my journals. I still have them. My screen's a little blurred, but you can see this is the full experience of my time away back in 2015 and 2016. And I've held on to all of them. It matters. This time away, when I open up these journals and I look at the pages, I see my own handwriting. It's me. It was my thoughts, it was my emotions, it was my feelings, and I can't understate how transformative it was to be in a place where I was able to interact with myself in a safe way through these journals. And so all these years later, I still hold on to these journals. I can't believe I get the opportunity to edify them over and over again. I don't think, Valerie, I'll ever exhaust or fatigue of sharing the good news and the impact of the interactive journals and the change companies. And I really know and hope and am believing that the people on the other end of this webinar is feeling the sincere conviction that I have as it pertains to this. I would not be the entrepreneur I am today without interactive journals. I would not be the active father and healthy active father in the life of my children without these interactive journals. I'm just so grateful and thankful. I get to do the work. You're doing the work out there in your community. You get to adopt these same things that are working and has worked for me. It will work. It takes time. Change takes time. Slow motion is better than no motion. So let's, regulate those expectations and know that, failure and relapse and recidivizing is a part of the journey and process. But let's keep meeting people with compassion and empathy and implement these interactive journals and these approaches. And I know it works. I'm living and breathing that it does exactly what it's designed to do.
Thanks, Terry. I'm really excited to share today um, a new innovation when it comes to interactive journaling that's been around for about a year now called Atlas. This is a digital delivery system of our interactive journaling library that leverages a lot of those underpinnings of CBT, MI, along with really giving you the ability to individualize the programming to the person served. So you can see in this example, using Atlas, you're able to As a staff member, select a criminogenic risk and need domain, in this case, cognitive behavioral. And then what gets generated is a range of recommendations across journaling, a video library, a podcast library that can vary in a very targeted way, help you address those needs for that person. What that can do is further engage your clients, help them feel like this is about me, this is about where I'm heading and my personal goals. It can increase adherence to your program and help people make measurable gains against their case plan and goals and increase motivation because, again, this is about them and their needs and not about you and your program and what we do here. It really increases the opportunity to tailor make programming to the individual needs of your participants. What it does for staff is gives you a number of at-a-glance insights that will hopefully save you time. You can see there's a dashboard here that helps you see at a glance what's going on with my participant, who's thriving, who's at risk that I may need to spend a little more time with. It enables you to plan sessions in 60 seconds or less that are also tailor-made to the needs of your participants, cut those admin tasks in half, and really give you a bird's eye view on program engagement. Um, there's research on interactive journaling, as I've shared, that shows that it reduces recidivism. Research is underway on Atlas, but we're really confident that with the enhanced features of this particular platform, we're going to see more of that. We're going to see an increase in desistance as program access increases and just an increase in overall engagement as people are able to, again, engage with content that matters to them and their unique needs today. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Uh,
Really well, by the way.
we were speeding.
Yeah, we
We never know how quickly we'll get through these 5 elements because, again, it's a lot, but happy that we've made it this far. And thank you all for sticking with us. We want to invite all of you as we sort of recap and review these 5 elements to consider, first of all, where are you already strong? What's working inside your agency that you can sort of savor for a moment and feel really proud of? Because the work that you're doing is important. You are making a difference. And I guarantee that one of these 5 areas is something that you're already quite skilled at as an individual practitioner and as an organization. So think about that for a moment. What's one area that you want to step into more? What did you hear from Terry's story today from one of these recommendations that you think, yeah, we could do that in my work. We could integrate this. And then the third question is to consider, okay, now that you've identified that area, what's one thing, one small step that you can take to get started and move forward with that change within your organization?
love it.
Okay, we have a few minutes left. There were some really great questions that came up during registration. There's no world in which we'll be able to get to all of them, unfortunately, but we did want to cover a couple of questions that really jumped out to us that we thought would be important for the larger group. So Terry, I'm gonna hand the mic to you first to answer one of the ones that you thought was particularly salient.
Yeah. So when we got all those questions, I saw a theme there around employment. And before I started Hurdle Life Coach Foundation, I actually worked for another nonprofit and worked a work training program and helped the formerly incarcerated deal with employment day in and day out. And one of the tools that I learned there and I still use today that will help is called the 1090. You know, the formerly incarcerated person can't undo their choice, and so they can't be, they're going to be a felon. But how do you help them to describe that experience in a way that drives confidence for the employer to give them that second chance? You use something called the 1090. And essentially what you're doing is you use the first 10% of the response to tell me more about that felony conviction. I see you check the box. Tell me about that. 10% is what happened, how long you were away, what you learned while you were away. The 90% is what are you doing now that you're out? How have you changed now that you're out? What are the positive things that you're doing now that you're out? And what are your goals moving towards the future? When you help them to not swim in the past for too long, where they get too emotionally charged and they might get on the tangent, and all of a sudden you're just bringing up the gloom of the past, that's not driving confidence. So, for example, I could say something as simple as, 10 years ago, I was in a different place in my life, and I said yes to something I should have said no to. I didn't have the strength to resist the peer pressure I was under, and because of that, I ended up in federal prison. But while I was in federal prison, I reshaped my thinking. I learned that I struggled with entitlement and overconfidence. And since my release, I have been active in my recovery. I go see a peer coach every day. I volunteer in the community, and I have goals to start my own organization in the next 5 years. This type of opportunity will put me on that step in that direction, and I would love the chance to be able to come and work for you at your company. Most of that statement had to do with what I learned and where I'm going, and I didn't swim too much in the who I was and where I've been. Help them by to shape a 1090 response to the when they have to check that box.
Great. Perfect. The other question that came through was about the RDAP program specifically, the program that Terry's been describing that he went through during his own incarceration. RDAP stands for Residential Drug Abuse Program. There are similar programs used called RSAT programs at departments of corrections across the country. So the question was, what statistics do you have for RDAP versus non-RDAP clients and returning to prison? We actually do have some compelling research on the impact of the RDAP program on RDAP completers. So the study that was done was on 195 RDAP completers that came back and looked at them 48 months post-release. What they found was that compared to non-completers of the RDAP program, the people who did complete this program were two times less likely to engage in criminal activity, 4 times less likely to engage in substance using behaviors, and 10, that's right, 10 times more likely to gain employment and housing. These are significant metrics. Again, everything that's been covered in today's webinar takes elements of that program and helps you think through ways that you can integrate them into your own programming in community environments. Some of you are in custody environments. So all of these tools really come together as part of this RDAP program to bring about these really powerful outcomes.
Yeah, so we want to end you with this. We talked about the power of peer support as it comes to justice involved people with justice involved people. It's very important that we take that peer support into each other as colleagues in this space. That same type of compassion and empathy and patience and gentleness and accountability that we are suggesting, advising, encouraging, and sometimes even requiring our clients to do, we need to do that for each other. This is hard work, it's heavy work, and we're going to be able to do it longer, safer, and help more people if we're being good peer supports to each other as well. And so it's important that Valerie and I stay in touch, keep each other accountable, make sure we're checking on not just our professional life, but our personal lives too, and then that we can show up with something to give because we are making sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well. Be good peer supports to one another.
You deserve it, all of you. Thank you so much for the important work you do. We're going to close out today with just another really big thank you to those of you who attended, to the really great questions that came through, as well as the really powerful stories, comments, testimonials in the chat today. You're all doing really great work. We appreciate you so much, and we look forward to continuing to learn from you and follow your journeys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.